Hello, and welcome to Girl Bye, the podcast where we bring the queer conversation to the so-called norm. Today, I want to show my extreme excitement for one of the people that I have watched grow up for so many years. Welcome to this wonderful podcast. Alex, how are you doing?
It's pretty good. Um, excited, super excited, kind of nervous, but super excited.
Well, definitely don't be nervous. This is the podcast where we just talk about being normal and talk about our lives and have a good
Yeah.
time. So let's kiki and dive in. So tell our listeners a little bit about yourself, where you're from, where you currently live, some of your hobbies, anything interesting.
All right. I'm Alexander. I'm originally from New York. Um, Currently live down in Florida. Moved down here to work for the theme parks about a year ago. Working at Universal Resort right now, and my hobbies are kind of all over the place. I do a little bit of photography, a little bit of art, a little bit of hair, a little bit of everything.
I think it's great to be well-rounded. So as we begin, we dive into where you are in the community as a whole. So where do
Yeah.
you identify yourself? What are your pronouns? All of that good stuff.
So I'm transgender, pronouns are he, him, and I'm also don't quite like labels, but at the moment I guess the best fitting label for me is gay, like romance wise. So
Mhm.
that's kind of where I'm sitting.
So you fit into the queer realm of life.
Yeah.
That's what it's
Yeah.
about. Tell us a little bit about when you kind of began to figure out that you were part of the queer community, helped pivot you the most.
So it started kind of around this time, actually, like 2015. My grandma was in and out of the hospital on her like last legs of life, and I realized I had to grow up really fast and kind of deal with this kind of stuff at I was 11. So like super young, really shouldn't have to have deal with that stuff. And it
Yeah.
made me pivot to the fact that I wasn't happy as myself. So ended up started kind of playing around with gender a little bit, was gender fluid for a while I figured out what worked best, and
Mhm.
ended up landing on just male and he him pronouns within like a year and a half, just kind of going by different things online and seeing what fits.
Awesome. When you were kind of coming into that, because I remember, um, I think as a child, you kind of get put into this mold that everybody sees because you don't buy your own clothes and you don't do all of those things, right? So
Yeah.
like people do those things for you and they do their best to understand what they're trying to do for their children. But was it like what made you kind of understand that that was the avenue? Was it more emotionally? Was it that you identify with like more masculine things? Kind of what kind of brought you to that thought process?
It was very emotionally, and it was also I was always GI Joe, Star Wars, monster trucks. I very rarely really played with dolls. I've From what I remember, I didn't really play with dolls. I remember more of my Lego sleepovers with my dad where we'd watch Star Wars nonstop and that kind of stuff. So it helped a lot because I had a semi big presence like online. So it
Mhm.
helped a lot that way that I could kind of research and figure out what fit and why I was feeling the way I was feeling.
Yeah. So for me, I always, I'm gay, so when meeting people that have the exact same background as me is a little different. So I find your story a lot interesting, and I've obviously
Yeah.
stayed along with your story for a long
Yeah.
time because I 100% support the growth and where you've come to. What was it like kind of being in New York, being in a place that is a lot of people think is super open, but unless you live in the middle of Manhattan, it is not the same all over New York.
Yeah,
So, I know that you're from Long Island and kind of a different world from the New York City
of New York
lifestyle.
City. Yeah.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit about like that hometown feel. Did you feel anything, outside of your family, maybe in school or whatever, that got you to understand some of the people that were like against you being more your authentic self? Any bullying, things like that?
Yeah, I had a lot of bullying throughout just my entire life just because of the way I was. Don't entirely know why, but I've noticed once I did start coming out because I had a lot of religious specific bullying
Hmm.
from both family and just school. Um, it was all like, well, I can't be friends with you because my religion says so, and it was annoying because at the time I was the same religion as them, so it's like it made me feel very isolated,
Yeah.
and a lot of people thought I was doing it for attention because I was always that quiet kid, and it came out during like the time that we want to be super popular and that stuff. So it happened. It's the problem with like the little small town is word does move fast, and everybody knew, like even before my parents knew. My parents knew before I even told them. So it's like that kind of stuff. That's
Yeah.
not the
No one wants to
best.
be no one wants to be outed
Yeah.
ever. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? You always want to be able to tell your story to who you want as you kind of get there. When it came to your journey and kind of where you started in that process of coming through to understand it for yourself first, right? Because I think a lot of people don't realize that sometimes we are battling it for ourselves before we can express it outwards to other people. And I
Mhm.
think when you've got to that point where you were ready to express it outwards, what did that make you feel like when it came from family versus strangers? What was like your common ground to make yourself feel better during that time frame?
My common ground because I've always been very like androgynous and I still am. So like my common ground was always the kind of when I learned hair and makeup, it was always, well, men tend to do this professionally, women tend to do this for a hobby. It's so like those kind of stereotypes helped
Mhm.
me feel a little bit better in my hobbies and in what I do myself.
Mhm.
Um, so it ended up being just a lot of stereotyping of myself that
Yeah.
just made me feel like I wasn't doing it for attention. And like what people are saying is wrong because I am almost forming myself to these stereotypes.
So do you feel like you were fitting into the stereotype to be more relatable to people's perception, or were you fitting into the stereotype because that's how you felt, like more internally?
Probably a little bit of both. Um, Outwardly fitting into the stereotypes to be more relatable and to be more understood, and then
Mhm.
internally like fitting into the stereotypes more to describe what I was feeling, like, well, I really want to do this, but so and so says that it's a woman's hobby, but stereotypically it's a big like gay men hobby, and it's that kind of stuff.
Yeah. And what do you think people were the most worried about in this time frame? Like, what do you think it was that made people so negative towards your transition?
Um, well, so apparently I was always like a girly girl when I was younger. I don't believe it. I liked dresses, but that's like the only really thing that I liked. Um, but like I know especially like my parents,
Hmm.
because of the way that everything came about, my dad still believes to this day that it is just a coping mechanism and that I'm just trying to forget my past and
Hmm.
change myself so I don't have to go through the things that I went through.
Yeah.
which makes no sense because I've been through worse, but like I don't know. They're weird. People are weird. It's long
Yeah.
story short, people are weird.
People are definitely weird. I think people, um, you know, I try to be as like open-minded to everybody's perception of things. But I also feel like a lot of people hate femininity.
Yeah.
How do you feel about kind of like the feminine masculine trait and what that kind of means to you
Yeah.
that you fit in?
I well, the way I kind of see things, I see things from a big like art perspective. So to me, hair, fashion, makeup, really any way that you present yourself is an art form in itself. And so like for example, like yesterday I went to a horror Comic-Con and I was in generically masculine clothes. I had jeans and a flannel on, but I had a full face of makeup. And it's that kind of like that's how I like to do it. I like to clash a little bit, and
Yeah,
it's because it's the art of it all. It's
right.
it's the changing yourself, or not even changing yourself, but accentuating features for the reason that you want to do it for, like all that kind of stuff.
Yeah. Very much like the understanding of like, um, it's funny because almost every episode I have mentioned RuPaul Charles, but RuPaul says we're all born naked and the rest is drag, right?
Yeah.
The rest is an art form, it's you expressing yourself. I very much identify with that, like understanding of, every time you walk out your house, it's a moment for you to express living art.
Yeah.
People love makeup and some people spend hours on their makeup to go to the grocery store. And I feel like that is a form of art, right? That is a form of expression that not enough of us talk about. So I definitely understand that.
Yeah.
Now growing up, being out of school, being in this or high school, being in this realm of adulting, working, how do you feel your identity is related or not related, or taken in a positive way or negative way at work?
So work is a little hard because we have a really big team and we have 7 managers, I think,
Oh.
ish, like naming them in my head. Around
Mhm.
7, 6. And so everybody kind of treats me different and but I kind of gone into the right realm of working because almost everybody who works in a theme park is either really, really open or really, really gay themselves. And so I haven't had a lot of negativity from
Yeah.
that, but from managers, I still get that same kind of religion excuse. And it seems like they don't know how to treat me like a normal person sometimes.
Hmm.
And like my identity does not matter. I'm still a person and you don't need to treat me differently because of who I am.
Right.
And it's that kind of stuff. But at the same time, people do it without knowing that they do it. So you can't really hold it against them, but it's there.
Yeah, I think it's kind of a transition phase for a lot of people because I think most people that we come across, you know, to be honest, have grown up in small towns somewhere, and have not really come in contact with a lot of people. My biggest thing is like, you cannot say that you do not like or understand or anything of any of people's demographics or the way they identify themselves, mainly because a majority of the time you haven't even met somebody in that group of people to even get to understand that, right? And so
Yeah.
like, when I hear somebody bring up a conversation about trans people, my favorite thing to ask somebody immediately is, do you know somebody trans? Like,
Yeah.
do you personally know somebody that has transitioned? And a majority of people that you talk to are going to say no. They have never met somebody because the people that have actually transitioned, there's not that many people in the world to begin with. How can you have like a point of view on something that you've never actually encountered, you know?
Yeah.
So I find it really interesting. And to hear that at work, that is so funny about there is a lot of gay people that work in amusement parks. It is
Oh
the
yeah.
funniest thing. I lived in Florida for a while and
Yeah.
went to a lot of amusement parks. And it is funny how there are so many queer people at the amusement park. I think it's the fantasy.
It is. It's the fantasy and it's the
Yeah.
act. It's like
Yeah.
working for Disney is all about the act. Universal a little bit less, but it still is your people don't get to know you before they come up to you. And
Right.
so it's that automatic no judge that I think a lot of people really like
Yeah. And at
because
Disney, you're on. It's like a movie all day,
yeah.
every day over at Disney.
And Universal really is too. Like it's
Yeah,
practically the same thing. Um so it's that kind of stuff that you're acting. You're putting on a
yeah.
show because you're representing this huge company that people are coming all around the world for.
With your work experience so far and kind of like the different things that you've done in school, what is some advice that you would give somebody that is going through the same things as you? Maybe they're in their earlier stages of finding themselves. What kind of advice would you give them in keeping a positive point of view?
Really don't be afraid to do what you love. And if you realize you don't like it, you can always stop doing it. Usually you can stop doing it. Um so that's kind of like if you do really like makeup, do it. There's nothing stopping you. Your identity does not matter, especially these days. Your identity does not matter. If you like any of these stereotypical feminine or masculine stuff, don't be afraid.
Yeah, dive into it and
Dive
just
into
own
it.
it. Yeah.
Yeah, don't be afraid to own it. You don't need to be on social media. I'm not really on social media anyways these days. Like you don't need to share that you're doing it. Just do it.
Yeah. And I think that works for a lot of things. I think a lot of people, there's a lot of queer people in a lot of these industries that people genuinely have a lot of fun doing, like hair, makeup, design, fashion.
Yeah.
And I agree. People should just own their ideas. I mean, chase your dreams. I know that sounds so cliche, but it's
But
you'll find
you got to do it sometimes.
you'll find
You
so
got
much
to
more
move.
fulfillment.
You got to move across the country without your parents at the age of 19. Like you got to do it sometimes.
Yeah. It'll give you a different perspective
Yeah.
on what you're doing. Yeah. So with that being said, and transitioning into sometimes you got to get away from your family. Let's talk about a little bit about relationships with your family. I know that you're really close with some people, not close with other people, as
Yeah.
I am. So uh, what would you like to share about your family in general, about how you've kind of grown with them? Um, and in that, because this is kind of like a loaded question. So, in that, what are tips that we could give other people going through this that could help them kind of navigate their family life? Like, what would you give advice is like, oh, you should probably do this because I did it a different way and it didn't work out for me, or something like that.
Really you got to be patient. Like you saw how our family was the first time. First time everything went down and I lost my patience and don't be me and don't be petty and don't like be like, well, this person doesn't like it, so I'm not going to talk to them anymore. Sure, if it's something super bad, obviously don't be afraid to cut them off, but if it's
Right.
something kind of superficial like just messing up a name or pronouns, You got to remember they've been calling you by that name or pronouns for how many ever years it's been. So you got to be patient. Don't be afraid to correct them. Don't don't be scared to sit them down and be an adult and be like, "Hey, what you're doing is upsetting me and I don't appreciate it." They might not listen, but normally they do. At least they
Yeah.
try.
Yeah. And I think part of that, because I do want to add to that a little bit before you continue, is the fact that a lot of these people have the perception that you're still a child.
Yeah,
You know what I mean? And I think a lot of the time as you're growing up and figuring out your own things, you are also trying to change the narrative of the story that they have, which is you're still like the 5-year-old kid running around at the barbecue. And that's not you anymore. Like
I
you're a
still
full
sit
grown
at the kids'
adult.
table
You still sit at the kids' table?
if I have to.
Oh, I'm not sitting at the kids' table. I'll just not attend the event. I'm fine with not showing up. But yeah, I guess, I mean, yeah, I guess if you have to sit at the kids' table. Um, for people listening, don't invite me if I'm sitting at the kids' table. But ultimately, I think, you're changing that narrative. And I think
Yeah,
when we are putting ourselves in like we're the adults now. We understand what we want. We understand our perception. And sometimes you have to remember that, patience is key because you do have to get them to change the perception that you're no longer a child and you're now an adult.
that perception I've noticed has changed a lot when I moved away because now like some of the aunts, all of our titis that I kind of didn't feel like would ever get the memo and would ever actually try really hard
Mhm.
seems to be trying harder and doing much more. And it's like they know that I'm not gonna change back. I'm not gonna revert. I'm not gonna detransition. They know that
Right.
I'm actually serious. And it's that kind of, well, I was a kid. Maybe it's just a phase, which it can be. And that's completely valid if it is. But sometimes people get stuck in that thought. And especially people who, again, have watched you grown up, they get
Yeah.
the and have watched you go through phases that you get stuck in that thought of maybe it's just a phase. Maybe we just gotta wait it out and see what happens. And just that fact that I am no longer a kid
Mhm.
and I am living on my own. I have my own bills, working full-time job, doing all that jazz is helps with that perception that it's not a phase.
Right.
And that's I like that a lot.
Yeah. I think when you find that turning point,
Yeah.
it really helps kind of your overall growth as well. Because I'm sure that like battling family and stuff and going through all of these things, it's kind of even more stressful. And then once you kind of like get people on your side that are starting to really understand, it kind of makes the process a little bit more enduring.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
I won't say easy because I don't think
It's
any of the
not
processes are
easy.
easy,
Yeah.
but I think it makes it more endurable, more
It makes
like,
it easier to deal with.
yeah. I feel like you start feeling like you have like a cheerleader team. Like you have
Yeah.
people that are on your side, rooting for you, rooting for your success and kind of
Yeah.
whatever it is that you want to do.
Yeah.
Um, So transitioning from family to now being on your own, now you're in a relationship, but before you got into this relationship, what was dating like? What tools did you use in dating? What are some things just things that you would want to share with other people about figuring out where to start with dating?
Um I've known it back home dating was not really the best because you had the people who were like, well, if you're a boy, I'm not gonna date you because that'll make me gay. And then you'll have the like bisexual people who's like, well, I'm can't be sexually attracted to you because in my brain I'm dating a boy and then it's the wrong parts and blah 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 blah. So I ended up doing a whole phase of like online dating, which isn't the best, but sometimes when you're really young and you just desperately want somebody on your side, it works. And don't be a don't be afraid to do it. Like, not the right way to say that. Don't be
Don't be
cautious
afraid. Don't be afraid to experience
to
online dating.
experience it. That's the right word. Be cautious, obviously, get to know the person before you do it, especially if you do anything other than just talking or video calling, anything sexual, you want to definitely know the person. God forbid they're a
Right.
predator. Um, but don't be afraid to experience it if you are younger and trying to figure yourself out. It could help a lot. Could also harm, but to me, it's helped. It's helped me a lot. It's helped me figure out what I want in a personal relationship, like an actual touch relationship. It's figure out what I need communication wise.
Yeah.
And so don't be afraid to experience it if the opportunity does ever kind of array. Um, Dating apps. It's funny because I started my dating app journey kind of wanting to do a little bit of like not necessarily hookup culture, but like dating culture without really getting in a relationship. So like do a couple dates here and there, see if they really date the way that people expect you to date. And it did end up that the relationship that I'm in now, we did meet on a dating app. Um, and it was like he was like the first person that I talked to. So that's the same kind of thing. Don't be afraid to experience it if you feel like you need to.
Yeah.
Um, it's very hard with my generation to meet people in person, especially because me, I don't drive. Don't drive. I'm obsessed with my work. So I don't have a lot of free time. And the only way I'm really going to meet somebody is if they work with me. And
Mhm.
that doesn't always end up well.
I do think that that could be very hard. I also think that that could create a really hostile work environment.
It could also be really good.
Yeah.
Like that's how my parents met. My parents are also my parents, so they're older and they're that previous generations that didn't really have the opportunity to meet online. My roommate met her boyfriend at work and they're going really strong. So it
Yeah.
could be good, but it could also be really bad. And really depends on how you are in a relationship. If you want to be with your partner 24/7, then it's probably a good thing. But
Yeah.
if you're like me, who is still very happy to be independent and be be able to do stuff on my own, then not not meeting in the workplace and not dating in the workplace is a good thing that way as well.
Yeah. And I think it's we're in this phase in life now where you have, I think, two really big groups of people. Like you have like the group of people that genuinely want to like bump into the love of their life. Like you were walking in the city and you bent over to pick up something you fell and you just walked into somebody and all of a sudden it's a fairy tale. And then I think you have like the group of people that just meet people online.
Yeah.
And I don't think either is right or wrong. I think I'm like the believer that you're gonna bump into the person that you're gonna be in a relationship with one way or another. Like I'm
Yeah.
very big on like the universe will bring you together. Like
Yeah.
there's no way all of these people that have really long lasting relationships were strategic in any
Yeah.
way. I'm bumping into this significant other, right? I think it's like you're going to just be in the same place at the same time, or you're going to be on the same app at the same time, or something's going to happen that's going to create that space. Really understanding kind of like that whole picture of like being open to any experience, I think is what I really try to dive into with a lot of young people in the dating space. Because you've got to be open to anything that you may go to a concert and bump into
Yeah.
somebody and start talking to them and get to know them. You could go to a pride festival and bump into somebody and start talking to them. So I think really understanding that like you can't just do one. I think you're gonna kind of come across both options as your life goes on.
Yeah. I'm really into you're gonna find the person that you really need when you stop looking. If you're if you're not looking for a long-term relationship, that's when you're gonna find a person that you're gonna see an entire future with.
Right.
And if you're trying to hunt out something, like you're trying to hunt out getting married ASAP, that's when the universe is gonna say, yeah, no, you're not ready for this, and not give you the person that you need.
That's so true. Because the relationships I have been in always came in a time where I was like, screw it. I'm just gonna go get as many free meals that I can possibly get at
Yeah,
at dinners.
yeah. Let me go be cute and get all the
Yes,
dinners
all
and
the
see what
dinners.
happens.
Take me out, buy me
Yeah,
things, send me flowers,
yeah,
and maybe somebody will make me not want to talk to five or six people at the same time
yeah,
to make sure
exactly.
that my week is busy.
Yeah,
Yeah, I think it's definitely a change and kind of, I feel like a lot of people don't date the way I feel like dating should be. Like a lot of people talk to one person and then you're like dating, but like you're only talking to that one person. That's not really dating. You're just talking to that
yeah.
one person.
Like
Dating is
you're,
like being able to talk to multiple people at the same time. You shouldn't be committed to anybody. Now, that doesn't mean you should be out here, sleeping with five or six different people at the same
yeah,
time. If that's your gig, get up in it and that's all
you go,
you.
girl. Like,
Yeah. But like dating itself has nothing to do with sexual parts of dating, right? It's like dating is like getting to know somebody and figuring out if you even
yeah.
want to continue to spend more time with these people. In your dating experience, are there people that you dated that like during the first date, you're like, maybe we're better off friends?
Oh yeah. And it happened a lot like in school when I was
Mhm.
younger. And it was that the kind of, because you when you're young, you really don't want to date a stranger. You're gonna date your friends and be like, maybe I do have more than just friendship love for you. And
Right.
it's happened a lot and it's backfired a lot. But it has, and I'm still friends with a lot of people that I kind of was like, yeah, maybe I do just love you platonically and there's nothing more to this. And we were wrong in thinking there was.
Right.
It helps a lot when it's a mutual thing. If it's not
Yeah.
mutual, it doesn't always work out too well. Um,
Yeah, very true. I'm the type of person that I try to be extremely open. So like when I was dating, I'm not the person to be like, oh, I'm not gonna date you just because like whatever picture you sent me or whatever. I've always been
yeah.
pretty open. I mean, unless you sent me a picture that was wild. I mean, in the dating world, on apps, I have gotten some crazy photos
Oh
with
yeah.
invitations to a date that I have declined.
Yeah.
But if you were normal looking and you sent me a thing, your appearance really didn't matter too much to me as much as I always said yes to the first date.
Yeah.
Mainly because I wanted to get to know the person. Like I want to like go somewhere that is, in the world, like a restaurant or somewhere. If you invited me on a date to a movie or a club, I'm declining because we're
Yeah,
not getting to know each other
you
at the
can't get to
movie.
know people without that conversation. That's just like Like you can easily go to the movie as friends. You don't a first date really should be a lot of conversation. Um
Yeah.
Mine technically was at a theme park, but it also wasn't planned. It was, hey, I'm at the park, and
Oh,
just
wow.
as a, hey, here's an update of my day. I ended up going to the park, and he's like, oh, I'm at the park too, and we just kind of was like, screw it, first date.
That's
Like,
awesome.
yeah, it wasn't entirely planned, but then theme parks, you have lines that you can talk in. You have a
Yeah.
lot of conversational like starters, like, hey, what's your favorite
Yeah.
ride? Blah blah blah. Um, so you gotta talk.
Yeah. I've so my first date, and I for the listeners, I know some people have already said that I need an episode about my story. So that is to come, be on the lookout. But my first date with my current partner was actually to the mall.
Yeah,
So I didn't want to go shopping alone. So
fair.
like I wanted to go shopping and like get some clothes and some shoes. But like I didn't want to go by myself that day. I was just like not really feeling it. So I was like,
Yeah,
hey, you want to go to the mall? And so
yeah,
like now you're walking around the mall. Now you're like, oh, does this look cute on me? You know what I
yeah.
mean? Like this is a complete stranger. Is this cute on me or not?
Is this
Like,
cute? Like,
yeah, you know what I mean? Like, so it was crazy, and we ended up spending a lot of time together that day. This is a great
especially if you
date,
hit it off,
right?
it
Because this is a
it
great date where
full
if
on
it got
extends.
weird, you could just leave.
Yeah,
Like, oh,
and
I'm done shopping.
that's what I like about like dinners. It's a little hard. If it gets weird, you're kind of stuck there. You're kind of stuck there finishing your meal. But if you're walking around the mall, the park, New York City, like,
Yeah. On a first date, you should not put yourself in a place where you can't get out quickly.
yeah,
Yeah, I think, and it's not no hard feelings to anybody out there, but it's just giving you the option to say, "Oh, I finished my coffee and I have to get back to work or I
yeah.
have to get back to doing something." But I've also always been the person like if I'm gonna go on like a coffee date where like let's say it's, during lunch or something, I've always cleared my schedule after.
Oh yeah, just in case.
Just in case. I don't want
Just in case
to.
you're like, hey, you want to go to the mall? Like, just
Yeah.
in case.
Yeah, just in case I want to continue this a little more. Because I also feel like that's a great time to decide, like, you'll get the feeling. Because if you want to continue and they want to continue, and they also pre-plan their schedule to be empty too,
That's
you
usually a good sign.
you already know like both of you are on the same page.
Yeah,
Where like if they're like, oh, I'm sorry, I have to go, I also understand where that's gonna go.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Definitely dating is not easy in any way, shape, or form. Advice to everybody, go on a first date somewhere in public, somewhere that you can get out as fast as possible if you want. Don't trap yourself at a dinner.
yeah.
Now, second date, go to a really expensive dinner.
And then make them
Just
pay for it.
make them pay for it. Right. Your transition in life has been pretty big,
Yeah,
um especially with your own self like worth and getting to know yourself and being 100% authentically you, but also like dealing with other people. What is your biggest advice to someone else trying to just find out who they are?
experiment. Like, really, don't be afraid to talk to your closest friends and be like, hey, I want to try out this name and these pronouns for a week or two, and I'll check back in and tell you how I feel.
Mm,
Um, Same thing with everything but name and pronouns. It's nothing bad with being male and going on a date with another man and going, you know what, I don't really feel that spark, that chemistry. Maybe I am just attracted to female or feminine people, and just really fear, put it in the back of your mind. It
Yeah.
don't get rid of it completely because then you're really not safe and not following common sense. But
Yeah.
don't let it control you. And
Definitely.
don't be afraid of what other people are gonna think. Um, Mostly for that people change. People have opinions that you might not agree with, and you can still be the best of friends with them. Like, you don't need to get along completely with friends. You don't need to get along completely with managers. You're not gonna please everybody. You might try,
Yeah.
but it's not gonna happen.
Yeah. People pleasing is not a trait.
It's not.
It's not a trait that people really want to see.
Yeah.
Definitely understand that. And in kind of like that whole context there is really, for me, people understanding that you're loving yourself and finding like where you fit in the most, where you feel most comfortable. I think a
Yeah.
lot of people don't realize how large of a spectrum that is.
Yeah.
Um, and I think a lot of people automatically put sexuality with kind of, where you land. And I think that that's also part of the problem, right? I think what you like sexually has nothing to do with the way you feel and what makes you you.
Yeah.
I think when you really dive into like, there's millions of kinks in the world. Um, and those kinks are taken part by multiple people from very many different groups, right? So you can't be like, all BDSM people are queer because they're not. There's actually a lot of
There's
straight men
a
that like
lot of straight people are
that
BDSM.
love to be tied up, right?
Yeah.
And so like you really think about kind of like that whole spectrum. I think sexuality is one thing, and I think that as a as a mass of people, as a community of people in general, we need to get to a better understanding that both things are very separate.
Yeah.
That as you identifying as male, as gay, has nothing to do with sexually what you may like. And I think a lot of people, if they can get those two things separated in their brain, they'll relate so much better. When you start really getting to that level of understanding of separating the two, I think it becomes a little bit different to like why certain people deal with certain things. You know what I mean? I think
Yeah.
you've got to be able to cut those two in different ways because then you'll find yourself better. Because just because you're, let's say, let's say you're a cisgender woman and you think you're bisexual because you like women and men, um, you know, not necessarily does that make you bisexual if you don't actually feel like you can love a woman outside of the sexual encounter. Then it's just a kink.
Yes.
You just like to
Then
be
it's
in
pretty much a kink. Yeah.
yeah, you just like to be in that environment for the fun of it sexually versus really loving
Yeah.
somebody.
And that's not anything negative. That's
Right.
a like you do you. You not everybody needs a relationship to be happy. Some people can be completely in the kink world and not have a real relationship, but have all of these little like sexual relationships.
Right.
And you can do that and don't feel embarrassed by it. Just
Yeah.
people might not agree. People don't agree with anything. People are always gonna somebody's always gonna be upset at you. So don't be embarrassed about what you like in general, hobby wise, person wise, sexual wise. Even if it's like a meme, like a foot fetish, if it gets you off, it gets you off.
Yeah. Not
Like,
everybody likes feet.
no. But there are people who do. People who do. Like,
Yeah. Isn't the I think I might be mistaken, but I think the foot fetish realm has officially like made it to the top five like kinks monetarily valued online because
is
like
it?
there's
Actually, it
Yes,
makes
there's a whole
sense
website now of like selling
because you
feet
you
pics
have
and
like Feet Finder and you have,
yeah.
I know like a lot of people like OnlyFans are only with their feet, and yeah, like
Yeah.
selling
So
feet pics is a thing.
yeah. So and I think like that's where those two realms don't fall together, right? Like just because you
Yeah.
like feet don't put you in a queer category per se. I think cisgendered straight people also have kinks for feet. I'm pretty sure a majority of them are the ones
So
buying the feet photos
yeah,
online.
yeah,
And I definitely think that that's something that if we can all come together to get that understanding, we'll stop merging those two ideas together. And I think that'll help kind of the community come together a lot stronger. And I think even us within the community could use that advice as well.
yeah,
Um, I think a lot of people, we even within the queer community, bringing us together as one is really important because together we can really bring ourselves to a different level of communication with other people because they don't have to look at us as like the weird, not fitting in group of people. When we all come together, we're all normal, we all do the same things. It's just we do what we like.
yeah.
Relationship now. How's it going? What do you find to be the most supportive thing out of it?
It's going really, really well. It's going amazing. It's the most healthy relationship I've really ever been in. Um, Supportively, I love that his parents his parents really support me, and his parents and his grandparents and all his family that I've met have just kind of brought me in as their own, and we haven't even been dating for a year. So it's that kind of like I came down here, I felt very, very lone. I only had two big family members and they're a whole hour away. And now
Yeah,
I have an entire family backing me and an easier mom advice that I could go to my mom and then I could go to his mom and get two different versions of mom advice and see how I can mix them together and to fit what I need.
yeah.
And that helps a lot. And it's brought me from the kind of, well, I'm alone to, well, now I have somebody who loves me to the end of the earth and isn't afraid to remind me about it. So it's that's the best part, really.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Unconditional love is what we're
Unconditional
all
love.
looking
Yeah.
for. Yeah.
Yeah.
The way I like to end this podcast every single time is taking a moment to say, girl, bye to some of those people from the past that just didn't add value to our lives or want to see us succeed. Who's one person that you officially would like to say, girl, bye?
Um, I don't. He's not gonna watch this because he doesn't care. So his name is Noah, and he was a relationship I had when I first moved down here, and was also a roommate. That's a long story, and he's just. I'm done with him. I'm done thinking about him. I'm done being afraid that I'm gonna run into him if I go to his workplace, if he's even still there. So just I'm done.
Yeah,
Just
perfect. I
yeah,
think when we get those moments, it helps us live more stress-free. I think
yeah,
a lot of people should take a moment and think about who they should eliminate from their thought process because it will free up that space for further success.
yeah.
So wrapping up this podcast and having a great time. Thank you, Alex, for joining us today on Girl Bye. If you have any further questions or want to leave comments down below, please do. You can catch us on YouTube and Spotify. Definitely leave extra questions you may want to hear in the podcast. And as always, if you want to share your story on this podcast, reach out to me and we can set up some time for you to express your story. Alex, anything you want to add before we wrap?
Not really. No, I'm good.
Well, thanks for joining us. I hope you
Of
have fun.
course.